Welcome, everybody, to the New Deal Ghost. I am your host, Max German. And on the New Deal Ghost, we talk about the art of politics, one conversation at a time. And so today I am very excited. I am joined by Matt Robison. He is a former Congressional Hill staffer, a former political operative, and now he is a writer on politics and has a great podcast called Beyond Politics that everybody should check out. Matt, it's an honor to have you here.
Max, it's great to be on with you. I'm glad that we're a little bit separated in age, and I'm glad that across the generational gap, there are still people who are interested in politics. This feels like I feel like I'm a horse and buggy guy. It's like, oh, you're still into that.
No, and it hasn't gone anywhere. The love for it, I have a lot of love for it, which is why I'm excited to have you on today because I want to talk about your experience in politics, kind of the idealism and why young people who might want to go into this as a profession should do it despite all the craziness, and then how this has changed, how you've seen these changes. So let's start off. What got you into politics?
Mistakes, happenstance. My father was a Reagan Democrat. My mother is a an Upper West Side of Manhattan kind of classic liberal. And I didn't really feel a pull toward it, and I kind of crab walked my way into it. I thought I was going to major in psychology in college. I ended up I ended up feeling like, God, there's a lot of studies that I find really boring here, and a little bit disturbing. So maybe I should do something else. And so I was thinking about political science, and then a rando told me, like, nah, don't study political science, study economics, because you're going to learn everything you would learn in political science through economics, but better. And she was right. She was really right about that. And I took a path through economics, decided, it's an awful lot of math here that, like, I kind of capped out on linear
Right.
algebra. And I'm like, it's about enough of that. But along the way, I had a couple of experiences. One was falling into a volunteer experience on the Bill Clinton 1992 campaign, where I actually
There you
got
go.
to sneak backstage and meet him. And I felt for one moment so he's in the green room. He just is fresh off of a press conference with about 20 generals and admirals, because he was under attack for his military record or lack thereof at the
Right.
time. It was
Right.
lost on the younger generation, but this used to be a thing people cared about,
I
like,
was gonna
oh,
say.
you dodged the draft, that seems bad. Like nowadays it's like, oh, you have bone spurs, you're a patriot. So so I snuck back into toward the green room, and all of a sudden I'm face to face with the guy who could be the future president of the United States. And I was kind of starstruck, and I stuck out my hand, and I meant to say, Governor, we're all with you, sir, or some stuff like that. Can I curse on this podcast?
Of course.
Some shit like that. And I just said, Governor, and he was, of course, more than equal to it.
Right.
He
Right.
took my hand and then my forearm by the elbow in that, like, double-handed Clinton handshake,
Uh,
and said,
uh-huh.
"Thanks, buddy." And the look he gave me at that moment, it seemed to be of such profound gratitude, such an immense connection for half a second. And I was like, well, all right, that's it. I'm in. And you've got Kennedy paraphernalia behind you.
Yep.
That's the kind of magnetism that some of these people have. And I was kind of hooked from there.
And what kept you in it? Was it for me, I saw that broad scale change can happen through politics and that basically you can help a lot of people through passing legislation, getting people elected who are going to pass that legislation. And there was that idealism in it for me. Did that kind of come later? Because what you're talking about with the magnetism or being pulled in, my first campaign, I showed up to knock doors and we were just talking about Worcester, Massachusetts.
Who is it for?
Representative Dan Donahue,
Okay,
and then Jim McGovern was a congressman,
sure.
who I'm sure you know plenty about. But basically, I had to climb up these three deckers in the middle of the August heat and knock on doors that nobody would answer. And then I'd come back, get some water, and they'd hand me another packet and say, go out and do it again. and I loved it. It's not, it's there's I guess what I'm getting at, there's an unglamour there, and there has to be kind
Yeah.
of something deeper that pushes us and keeps us in this.
Yeah, there's a weird brand of extroversion and thirst that goes
Yeah.
into this. And I'm saying that self-critically, right? Because if you have it, it's probably not good. Maybe someday there will be a cure. But like people who have it recognize it in one another. That experience, the triple deckers going up in the heat, that's what you're, right behind your head. That's what JFK did in his first Senate campaign when his back was
Yeah.
completely out. He had to go up the stairs one leg at a time, like kind of shuffle Frankenstein style.
Yeah.
And if you have that, some people who are incredibly intelligent, passionate about the world, don't have that. My wife does not have that. The worst thing I maybe ever did to her was ask her to help me with door knocking on a campaign, and I mean she might have forgiven me. That was like almost 20 years ago. Like maybe the statute of limitations has run out on that. Um, no, what kept me in it? The money. No, not the money.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Clearly not that. My first job on Capitol Hill, I was paid very, very, very little. I really did have this very old-fashioned sense of inspiration,
Hmm.
a feeling that this mattered. There was meaning in this. And one of the interesting findings in polling is that people who are maybe like in the cohort like 5 or 10 years older than you, I'm guessing at your age here, I'm not being an ageist. um, what we began to see in the 2000s was a lot of disillusionment, and it may have cropped up partly around the Great Recession,
Yeah.
but you began to see younger generations saying overwhelmingly they wanted to find a sense of purpose and meaning in their work. That was more important to them than just about anything else, which is interesting for a generation that got completely blown out of the water by the Great Recession, right?
Yeah.
And that sense of connection was not necessarily what people who are in, kind of like my middle agey kind of cohort were always looking for out of work. But I found it
Yeah.
with congressional work. I used to get this swelling kind of like sense of like heat in my diaphragm when I saw the Capitol Dome every morning. I'd walk to work,
Yeah.
and maybe it helped a little bit that I started I started my first full-time job on Capitol Hill right after 9/11.
Hmm.
Right, my congressional office that I worked in at the time was one of the four that actually found anthrax spores in the office. Um, during the anthrax attacks, which is a little bit lost to history, but at the time
No, I
we had just
remember.
gone
Yeah.
through the world's worst terrorist attack, and then suddenly there were people really had this feeling of, is this the apocalypse? Like, is this the
Yeah.
end times? What is happening here? And I think you go through that experience, and it does kind of give you this feeling like you felt going up the three deckers. It's like, well, this is for something. This
Yeah.
actually matters. And the more you kind of go through the painful parts of the experience with that eye on the prize of, oh, I'm going to do something really meaningful here, I think
Hmm.
the more wedded you are to it. So maybe that was it. I could tell you
Yeah.
more about the anthrax thing. I mean, I had a colleague who was getting married the day they were distributing Cipro to all of us because, they thought we might die.
Right.
And so she shows up in her wedding dress to get her Cipro allotment. Anyway, that's a whole other story. But I think that kind of set of experiences is what kind of kept me in it.
No, but to your point, there is something that pulls at purpose, meaning, and being on a team. There
Right.
is, because it is unglamorous. There's little money to be made. It's long hours. Sometimes you get the shit kicked out of you. You do all this work and the reward is not in the daily. You don't see the daily rewards a lot of the times. But there is that higher purpose and that idealism that I think sustains it. And that I think for any young person who's going into politics or who's been inspired to go into politics, don't discount that because I think that feeling is one of the most magical feelings to have and to feel like you're making a difference and then to have fun while you're doing it. I think I got hit. caught, but that's the bug they talk about.
Right.
People who get bit by the bug. I got bit by the bug, and I still love that, you
Well,
know?
let me ask you a question about that.
Yeah.
So you got bit by the bug climbing up the stairs, being on the campaign side.
Mhm.
Now, I had a realization at a certain point. I've been a campaign manager and I've been a congressional staffer more focused on policy. And I eventually realized that I'm more in it for the policy.
Yeah.
um, I'm less in it for the campaigns. I like campaigning because, like I like the adrenaline rush. Like, I like, but it's a lot more like, it's a lot more like sports to me. What it is for you? Is it the thrill of the fight of being in the campaign? Like, is that what gets you going, or is it eyes on the prize? Because at the end of this, the reward is I get to work for someone with a hold on power, and I'm going to do something with that power.
A little bit of both. It was when I first started, it was the thrill. Like that was one of the things I've never experienced this. I love this. And I'm also a huge nerd. I love history, right? So like I love the Kennedys, as you can see. So it was kind of this idea of, it was this idea of starting with it to be able to get to that point where hopefully I get somebody elected who then has a ability to influence decisions. But at the time, it was really just that thrill and the fun of it and kind of the excitement. And this was all new. I've been reading about all these political, like the JFK and history and all these campaigns. And like now I get to practice it. And
Yeah,
that was what was special for me. And then I've actually worked in government too. I worked in state government. Um, and it's a similar feeling. I think campaigns are anyone who's a lifetime campaign staffer or people who are consultants or who consecutively do campaigns outside of their, early 20s, hats off to them because it is a brutal lifestyle. And I found the state government is, you're right, you are able to influence policy a little bit more or have kind of that, you're in the room, right? Or you have the ability to be in the room. And so it was both and now I am kind of leaning a little bit more to what you're talking about, getting elected and being able to influence policy, kind of seeing the second half of that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's, you were asking before about what keeps you in it,
Yeah.
because you are right. it, there are many aspects of it that really suck, that like power suck. The hours are long, the pay is bad, and um, it's gotten worse and worse. My friends who have stuck it out in some kind of proximity to
Yeah.
Capitol Hill say it's absolutely awful. The members of Congress that I'm still kind of hooked into, worse and worse. Just the environment, the vitriol. It's pretty brutal. So you really do have to hang on to, and for me, it's the meaningful wins. So I worked for a member of
Yeah.
Congress who managed to pass a law that became kind of the reason that in the Affordable Care Act, young people can stay on their parents' insurance up to age 26. That had its roots in a bill that I helped my boss to pass.
Wow.
And it was based on a young woman who was in college, had cancer, and had to leave school because she otherwise couldn't. She had to stay in school, I should say. The choice was, would she have to leave school to get treatment? And the fact that she couldn't stay on her parents' health insurance drove the decision. She managed to graduate, and died. And we worked with her mother to pass, both at the state level and the federal level, um, Michelle's Law, which again, it fed into this larger thing. And like, if you're in this, if you're in this because you want to be somebody, it's always going to be empty.
Mm.
It's always ultimately, because there's always another race, there's always another member of Congress to work for, and like if you're trying to build up your name, you're going to find that it's fleeting. It goes away fast. That experience that Lyndon Johnson talked about, of arriving in Congress as a young member of Congress and having the elevator operator say to him, "Oh, you're going to love it here. I used to be a member myself." That's very real.
Yeah.
I ran into a former member of Congress, just like an old lonely guy in a diner. Um, when I was a young staffer in DC. If you go into it to be somebody, it's going to be empty. If you go into it to do something, and you don't really care about whether other people know your fingerprints are on something, but
Yeah.
you know that you did something meaningful that's helping people. I created the bill that created the Northern Border Development Commission, and it has put millions and millions of dollars into targeted economic development projects that have helped thousands and thousands of people in New England, in marginal, economically distressed counties, places that have lost hope, where people are moving away. Like there's no statues to Matt Robison, believe me, but if you can get satisfaction out of that, it'll be meaningful.
No, absolutely. And so give us a little overview of your congressional working on the Hill, your career arc there, and kind of the different positions you held, and kind of a little bit more about what you were able to do with each position.
I was I was in grad school, much like you. I was at the Kennedy School of Government. I got a summer position on the House Appropriations Committee. This is the place to be. You want to be at the place where they hand out the money. I was doing a special project for the staff director, and it involved some research. And so I called over to the Library of Congress. I said, I want to talk to people who are experts in the connection between scientific research and economic growth.
Hmm.
And I said, I'm over at the House Appropriations Committee. They said, can you be here in like 20 minutes? I was like, sure. And I sat down in a conference room with 14 people. Okay. They brought out all the experts. It's like, you're on the Appropriations Committee. You're not a big deal, but those guys, money, very important. So I did that. I worked for a member of Congress from Maine. I worked for his successor. So I worked for, and I exclusively worked in swing districts. And I think
Okay.
that's important in shaping my perspective and experience.
Yeah.
One of the things that's become hard in the Democratic Party is there are an awful lot of people with my age set and experience who came up in politics at a time where being a centrist really mattered to surviving in swing districts.
Hmm.
And now that is an open question, and younger Democrats, progressive Democrats, don't buy it. They
Yeah.
don't believe it. And it's not entirely clear who's right. And I'm trying very, very hard as a writer and an analyst now to not fetishize my own experience and to be open minded to the idea that the world has changed, and maybe the progressives are right. Maybe. Anyway, yeah, so I worked for a member of Congress from New Hampshire who is the co-chair, the national co-chairman of Barack Obama's 2008 presidential campaign. That was fun.
Yeah.
We did a lot of Obama stuff. I got to meet him. And the major thing I took away from that was I'm able to do an Obama impression that involves two words. I can't do anything more than two words. But around my house, if I would like to assess that something is not bad, I say, that was pretty good. And that's pretty much all I can do. That's the whole thing.
That was good. That was good.
Thanks. Oh, it was pretty good. So yes, and then my boss ran for the U.S. Senate. Guess what was not a time to run for the U.S. Senate as a Democrat and a member of Congress? 2010,
I
the
was just going
famous
to say,
shellacking.
yeah.
Yes. So we got shellacked. We got absolutely crushed. And then close to home for you, there was a member of Congress from Massachusetts who was in a surprisingly swingy seat and whose brothers-in-law were running an offshore illegal gambling ring. And his wife had gone to federal prison.
Okay. Yeah, I
And so he was, let's just call it a distressed political asset.
know.
And he was pegged as the number one member of Congress most likely to lose his seat in 2012. And when some political consultant friends of mine called me and said, you know, he needs a campaign manager, this seems like a great job for you, my reaction was, well, fuck you. You don't clearly like me very much.
Yeah.
Why would anyone in their right mind want this job? But I met John Tierney. I thought he was a good man. I thought he was in this for the right reason. And I thought he had gotten an unfair shake, especially because the Boston Globe Spotlight team that exposed the Catholic Church sex
Yep.
abuse scandal, Mike Resendiz, you know, that guy from the movie Spotlight, played by Mark Ruffalo. Yeah,
Yeah.
they were on his ass. And so I was
But
like, all right,
he didn't do any, right? He was
he did not
not
do
connected
anything.
in any way.
It
Yeah.
was his brothers-in-law.
Right.
And, you know,
Right.
the political case against him was, well, you know, your wife got some money from her brothers and that came into your household. And therefore, and he's like, I didn't have anything to do with this. I didn't know about it. It was her. She was, anyway, like
Yeah.
there was a whole, he was just like, what do you want me to do? Be a member of Congress and also doing an independent investigation of like my brothers-in-law and the shit they're up to. Anyway, so for no reason, I decided to run that campaign, which was a dead loser. Except we won, and it went from the number one most likely member of Congress set to lose to the biggest surprise upset in the cycle. And at that point, I had a young family, young kids, a young daughter, and one more on the way. And I said, you know, I've got to get out.
Mhm.
I've got to get out of this. This is a young person's game. I can't keep running campaigns. And
Right.
so I actually did a Crash Davis. If anyone is a fan of Bull Durham, I went from the big leagues to AAA, and I went to work. No diss on all my peeps in the New Hampshire
I
State
was gonna
Senate, but
say, yeah.
I became the policy director for the Democrats in the New Hampshire State Senate, and I settled down. And then I realized, you know, back to this low pay thing.
Mhm.
This is rough for my family, and so I went into the private sector, and that's, you know, after a few years of that, just to finally finish my incredibly boring life story.
I know.
Um, I I the itch that you were talking about before, the thing that impels you to walk up to the third floor in the heat. I just never, the cure is still, it's still out there somewhere, but I haven't found it. And so I started writing, and that became a radio slot and podcasting and a video show. And, you know, I've kind of stuck in that area, and it's just enough to kind of be methadone for my political addiction.
Right. Well, those are interesting. We'll talk about the campaign because it that sounds like an incredible story. And then also I want to one of the things that I love to talk about is how social media or podcasts have changed our politics. And so
Yeah.
you have probably have some great experience being on the other end of that, not in having been in politics and then also being a podcaster now. But when you came into Congress, what was the pathways to power? Was it committee chairmanships, certain committee chairmanships? What were the ways, like if I was a congressman who came into Congress and I was like, I want to have the most power I can, what would you advise me to do?
Um, take your vitamins, because if you're in the House, the pathway to power is to live
Hmm.
and hope that your party is in the majority when you are senior enough on a powerful committee to be the
Right.
chairman. If you're in the Senate, um, it's not dissimilar, but it's faster. You know, and you get a little bit more chance to vamp on the Sunday shows. It was a much more consolidated media environment. And
Yeah.
so, you know, you would try to find a way to get yourself into the national news. We managed it once in the financial meltdown with my boss in the House at the time, you know, in the Great Recession. AIG was going down.
Yeah.
So Rahm Emanuel, who is Clinton's chief of staff and is probably about to run for
About to run
president.
for president.
He at the time was the third ranking Democrat in the House, and he was running the campaign arm. And he called my the guy who became my boss from New Hampshire, Paul Hodes, when he was running. And, he said, Hodes, I'm about to dump $1.5 million on your race. Don't fuck it up. Do not fuck it up. Okay, Rob. And then he gets elected. He said, all right, I'm putting you on 2 committees. I'm putting you on financial services. That's your money. And then I'm going to put you on oversight. That's your press. Well, that's basically the pathway to power right there, right? Raise money, get press.
Mhm.
And that's what we tried to do. So it was an odd time to be on financial services during the Great
Yeah.
Recession when all these financial services firms had destroyed the world economy. But that's who you had to raise money from. And you're on oversight, which is your opportunity to mug for the cameras and try and get into the national press. And we managed it. Like, we engineered what at the time was considered a viral moment,
Yeah.
where we came up with a line, in the hearing. It's like, to the American people, AIG now stands for arrogance, incompetence, and greed. And he delivered it, and it made the national news.
Right.
We all popped the corks. It it's not like that anymore, because now you can be AOC, right?
Yes.
And you can have an independent power base. I mean, AOC raised $33 million last cycle between her PAC and her personal campaign, while winning her race by 30 points, right? And it's not because she was in a swing district. It's
Right.
because she's really smart. She's like Zoran, right? She's really sophisticated at social media. She's smart as hell.
Hmm.
And she's really good on camera, and she's really good on social. So there's another way to get an independent power base. Now, I will say that's not entirely different. It's a different technological means. It's not
Hmm.
entirely different from what's existed for time immemorial. I mentioned LBJ. He's the one who innovated this. He's the one who saw in 1940 that if you had a power base of a source of money, you could turn that in through the DCCC, which was a moribund organization at the time. You
Yeah.
could turn that into a personal power base for yourself, because you were the source of money for your colleagues.
Right.
That's still essentially what AOC is doing, but she also has social media notoriety.
So it's sort of morphed into a different form, but the same principle is there.
Right, exactly.
And so, but talking about AOC, right? Because part of what if you remember, she came into Congress, I think, you know, very early on, she was protesting with the Sunrise Movement in Nancy Pelosi's office,
Yes.
which in the day, if you wanted to climb the ranks, you would never piss off the leader of your party like that. But she did that. And I think it speaks to a little bit that AOC or MTG maybe, or maybe was on the Republican side, but there's less and less. AOC has kind of figured out a way to have the financial and the platform without climbing the ranks. So how do you think that fits into politics and like it seems the incentive structures for kind of going along to get along have changed?
Yeah, that's AOC is a really interesting case study, because at the time, 2018 cycle, she defeated Joe Crowley. Crowley was a member of Democratic leadership. He was an old white guy
Hmm.
who was from a diverse Queens district that had gotten much more diverse, and he'd been in Washington for a long time. And we have seen this playbook run many times in politics. So and so is out of touch. They've gone Washington, right? You saw it with Tom Foley, the Speaker of the House. You can run, or the Majority Leader. You can run that playbook. That's what AOC did, and there was a lot of I there was a lot of bloviation about, like, oh, this goes to show, a real changing of the guard, a real, like, she caught fire and she's really got a hold of something, progressive energy. And I call bullshit on all of that. I'm not underselling that she's smart. I just said, like, I think she's really savvy and
Right.
really smart,
Yeah.
and she's gifted. She's gifted as a politician. I take nothing away from her. But the whole analysis of why she won, there's nothing new under the sun there. And what you just cited is really interesting. That early case of protesting the Sunrise Coalition in Nancy Pelosi's office, that was a mistake. She didn't need to do that. it didn't get her anything. There's a little insider saying, it's attributed to a Democratic political consultant whose name is Mudcat Saunders. And it basically goes, and you'll excuse the double negative. If it doesn't get you money, press, or votes, and I rearrange those so that it's MVP, it's easier to remember. If it doesn't get you money, votes, or press, don't do it. And doing that Sunrise shit didn't get her money, votes, or press, and it pissed off the leader of her party. And you'll note that AOC is a smart enough person that over the years she's gotten a lot more sophisticated. She doesn't do that shit anymore.
Right.
And she's still raising plenty of money, giving it away. She's kind of like the leader of the progressives. She's the heir apparent to Bernie Sanders for a whole wing of the party. She's just figured out how to handle that position in a more sophisticated way.
So it's not necessarily that she's continued to do that. She's kind of adapted a little bit ways. So maybe some of like the, go along to get along for a better term, or for lack of a better term, is still there in a sense, but it's sort of changed a little bit. There is this other element there. And that's kind of what I was wondering was how politics has changed, and particularly in Congress. Was it your experience? Being from Massachusetts, we hear so many, the whole Tip O'Neill, right? Everybody's friends after 5 o'clock. They get a beer. There's like the Chris Matthews book. A lot of people remember that specifically in Massachusetts, and they talk about kind of this bygone age of where politics worked. Was that your experience? Was that true?
It was my experience, but if you went to Capitol Hill right now, it wouldn't be your experience.
Right.
By the way, sidebar, you mentioned Chris Matthews' book. Because it got eclipsed by the show of the same name, Hardball, the book is forgotten these days. Don't sleep on that book.
I have
It
read
is
that.
it is the best single volume for
Mhm.
practical practitioners, repetitively redundant. It is the best single volume on how to do politics that has ever been written.
Mm.
So
And
people should.
it's Hardball by Chris Matthews,
It's
right?
Hardball by
Yeah.
Chris Matthews. And back to your question, which relates, all the lessons from that book, hang a lantern on your problem. It's not who you know, it's who you get to know. Politics is local. He names each of his chapters with a piece of wisdom or guidance, and then he illustrates it. It's
Mhm.
such a good read. All those lessons are still true, but it's not true that everyone's friends after 5 o'clock. It was true for me. I mean, right now, if people, I'm going to self promote, I'm going to plug for a second.
Oh,
Worthknowing.substack.com is where you can get all of my stuff, the podcast, the writing. I write regularly for Newsweek. I reprint it all in the sub. Anyway, I also do a show once a week with a Republican, and we get along great, and we have a similar orientation, and he's anti-Trump. That's like table stakes for this
yeah,
kind of thing.
right.
And you can still do that. I still do genuinely have Republican friends. The member of Congress who occupied, I mentioned Paul Hodes in New Hampshire. The member of Congress before that was a guy named Charlie Bass. His chief of staff is a friend of mine. He was the chief of staff for the guy. I was the chief of staff for the next guy.
Yeah.
And we have a long running text dialogue together. And so it certainly is still possible on a micro level, but no, on a macro level, it is dead. And it's because what's fundamentally different, we thought as Democrats in the 2000s that the George W. Bush crowd, oh my gosh, these people, they're so conservative. Like,
Yeah.
where did they find these Martian maniacs? We had no idea.
No.
We had no idea. These people were people. Like, these people were fundamentally not awful.
Yeah.
The MAGA people are true believers, and they're immune to logic. They're immune to, you can't really have a conversation. Barney Frank, who you're very familiar
Yeah.
with from the mass delegation, there's what at the time was a viral video during the healthcare town hall summer of 2009, where some angry Republican woman was yelling at him about healthcare. And he said, why would I have a conversation with you? I might as well just talk to this table. What's the point? And that's, I think, the experience in
Yeah.
Congress now is you can't, there's not even a basis of common facts. I know you wanted to get to social media. I mean, I think that is
Yeah.
the thing, right? 50 million Americans have no meaningful access to local news anymore because all of the local papers have died. People live in news deserts. You see the absolute demolition of the Washington Post. The only major paper that's kind of thriving is the New York Times. USA Today is doing okay. The Inquirer, Philly Inquirer is doing okay. But like our list of allies grows thin.
Right.
The national news is in a everlasting downward slide. Back in 1980, Walter Cronkite time, 50 million people a night would be watching,
He was the most
right?
trusted man in America.
Right. And
Like,
now it's it's 2.5 million, perhaps. So,
it's
this is so trite. It's so trite to talk about, but it's so true. Like the fracturing of the media has become this incredible challenge. You can't drive a story. You can't just get yourself on Meet the Press
right.
to get control of a narrative. There's no, I mean, people can shit on the idea that there's like, a referee kind of calling balls and strikes, but you don't have that anymore. And so you end up with chaos. It's a really rough situation. And for political practitioners,
Yeah.
for campaign professionals, it's sort of it's sort of awful because now, like when I was running the Tierney campaign, I basically worried about I'm putting money on TV, which included broadcast and cable.
Hmm.
I'm putting money to mail. I was doing a little bit. This is 2012. I was doing a little bit of web stuff, right? Little bit. Now, you have to be on all the socials. You have to be on cable. You still have to be on broadcast TV. No one has any idea if any of it still works.
Yeah.
You're still doing some traditional mail. It's just, and you have to be on all of these ungodly, like satellite, Sirius. You got to be on podcast. Like, just to know all the places to put your money is a PhD level exercise. So it's
Yeah.
gotten very, very hard.
Well, let's talk about that. So, like, when you were working on the Hill and you passed a bill and you wanted to say, Congressman X passes bill, what would you do? You'd call up a bunch of reporters, you'd put a press release out, you'd spend the follow-ups, try to get on cable news, right? Like that was the playbook.
Pretty much. I mean, the bookers, for your local shows, and you'd want to get on
Yeah.
TV, and you'd push the press release, and you'd call and you'd chase it,
Yeah.
with and radio was a thing. I mean, Republicans own radio. It's a really fascinating thing. Um, Conservative talk radio really works. Liberal talk radio really doesn't work.
Yeah.
Someone riddle me that.
Why
I
is that? Yeah.
I
Why?
don't fucking know. Maybe it's NPR's fault. Like maybe
Yeah.
they've sucked all the oxygen out of the room. Like, I really don't know. I really don't know. I think and you know what else is interesting is that liberal satire works. The Daily Show works, Colbert
Yeah.
Report works on TV, but it doesn't work on radio. It does work for conservatives on radio. Like, man, I know you're a law guy, but like if you ever decide to get your PhD, there's a thesis waiting for you.
There's a lot. I think this whole medium has changed the way we do politics. To what you're saying, and conservative radio, I think Rush Limbaugh, I mean, you were probably on the precipice of this, seeing kind of the rise of in this new format and medium and what it's doing to radicalize people. I think that one of the problems is we get our politics with social media has devolved into echo chambers. And it's not even that you have a conversation with somebody, as you were saying. In the past, you could kind of have a common ground of facts, and that is gone. And now, if you were trying to run a campaign, trying to be on all those social media spaces or all these non-traditional media spaces, and then you have to get on the right ones, like, because at a certain point, you're speaking to your own audience. And that is particularly what I'm interested in is how social media has changed campaigns. Because what you're talking about with the fact that you have to be on all these different channels, what does that do to the campaign? What does that do?
Mm.
I think we're going to be moving into a place where candidates essentially videotape themselves. They're going to be like mini movie productions in different forms, trying to get that viral moment, talking to
What
voters.
was Mom Donnie?
Right.
Right? What was Mom Donnie? You're absolutely right. And Mom Donnie was it. And again, this is where I don't want to wade into the progressives versus moderates
Yeah.
war that's been going on for, what was the War of the Roses, like 100 years? I don't want to wade into that, but this is where progressives like, okay, I love you guys. You're like my Democratic Party cousins, but simmer down just a tiny bit, my friends, on this whole like Mamdani shows that progressives are in the ascendancy. Actually, it's not even the progressives pushing that point. Honestly, it's not your fault. It's the media that's like, ooh, let's come on, fight,
Yeah.
fight, fight. That's not what the Mamdani story was about.
No.
He was laser focused on the issue that people care the most about. Do you think that's maybe a good political strategy? I do. People really care about affordability. Huh? They want that. And you're in the affordability business and you're good on camera. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, seems like a good idea. Yeah, he is, I don't know, like if someone were to suggest to me that Mamdani was not a flesh and blood human being, he was a cleverly constructed AI avatar, I would have a hard time disproving it. He might just be like an absolutely brilliant his existence through TV. And I have Republicans in my life who are like, is he really that different from Trump? And I'm like, yes, he's not a fucking,
Yeah.
narcissistic maniac. But I think what they're trying to say is Donald Trump owes his entire existence to TV. He's not a real flesh and blood person
Yeah.
in the minds of most voters. He is the character he played on The Apprentice, which
Mhm.
was carefully engineered to look like people's conception of a rich guy,
Right.
and a success. And that image stuck and it worked. Yeah, I mean, things are fundamentally different. The only thing I'll say, and I won't go on forever about this unless you really want to alienate your whole audience, is I think the fire was set by Newt Gingrich in 1994.
Mhm.
His fundamental insight into media at the time was that people had it all wrong about you need to tell the truth, you
Yeah.
need to moderate your language, not your political positioning, but you couldn't go over the top because there would be blowback from voters and you would get tisked by the gatekeepers, the powerful anchors, the Peter Jenningses and Tom Brokaw's, names that are mostly lost to history now, Walter Cronkites.
Yeah.
And he was like, fuck that. The thing to do if you want to stick in people's brains is go as extreme as you possibly can. Anything less than that, it's like fighting with one hand tied behind your back. Why would you do that to yourself? The difference now, so that's been increasingly true of the Republican Party. And I don't say that to diss them. I say that to sort of, they had the insight. Democrats were much slower to catch up to that,
Yeah.
much slower. And the difference now is that Newt Gingrich lit the fire and social media platforms have become the kerosene. They're an accelerant. They have made it so that everything is about the extremity, virality, and attention. And we were just talking on my show with the Republican Political Rehab about Sydney Sweeney yesterday.
Yeah.
Here is an entirely manufactured controversy that is essentially people trying to mine the fact that she is a beautiful actress and sex sells, right?
Yeah.
And so
Always has.
always has, always will. That's human nature. And so they're like, oh, hot blonde actress. What can we do to manufacture a controversy? So first there was the jeans thing, and then there was her statement this past week that she didn't want to be seen as a political person. She didn't have any opinions.
Yeah.
And so like people on the left lost their fucking minds. It's like, this is what passes for discourse now.
Yeah.
And it's not because people are evil. It's because of the incentives.
Right. And Trump, I think different successful candidates recognize the different emerging mediums and utilize them effectively. And
Absolutely.
Trump has been, Trump tweets. I mean, and even though recently this week where he put out that fucking awful video of the Obamas, there's an idea behind that. There's a strategy because it breaks the news coverage and it forces the attention upon him, and everybody's talking about him. And I would be interested to talk a little bit what, and then he since deleted that, and they've had, differing explanations for why they did that. But Trump has initially really seemed to understand the attention economy and how
Right.
attention explain, kind of draw this out, right? Why does attention matter so much in today's political age? Because what are the benefits that a politician gets from it?
South Park put it together 10 years ago. They did this parody involving PewDiePie and Cartman, where he just realized it's more important to be trending than to be popular, and people were hate watching. And, it is because it drives the conversation. Are you always driving the conversation? And, it's interesting. You're so right. You're so right. I want to tease this out, and you tell me because you have a legal mind, right? So you're very good at clearly at inductive reasoning. So here's what your question makes me wonder. I'm going to turn this around to you. So I don't know why the dynamic of attention to your question is so important, but I think it's probably because of the psychology of availability bias. It's probably because you we are able to bring to mind that which recently happened in front of our faces.
Mhm.
And Trump's insight, per your point, is you just always have to. Now, he's a pathological narcissist,
Yeah.
so he's fulfilling a need with this. But
Right.
his political
Yeah.
insight is you always have to be driving the story. You always have to be the center of attention. You have to be the protagonist and the noun
Yeah.
in every sentence. And here's what I wonder back to you. Where is this going? Where is this going? Because is there a natural selection dynamic? I'm going to make a metaphor. Are you a poker player? You look like a poker player.
I have not.
Well, you do well if you walked into a poker room because I look at you and I'm like, oh, that guy, he could be a poker player. So the
Thanks.
game theory optimal strategy in poker
Yeah.
is to be what's called tight aggressive, right? When you go for it, you've got to really fucking go for it. You've got to go big. You've got to put the fear of God into people, right? Big, big bets, regardless of whether you have the cards or not.
Yeah.
And I'm a shitty poker player. I shouldn't reveal this. I'm a shitty poker player because
Yeah.
I don't really want to do that. It's just not comfortable or fun for me.
Hmm.
If I were working for a member of Congress right now, what I would tell them is stop fact checking your shit. Do what Trump does. Look for what's going to grab attention. Scream about Sydney Sweeney, but find that the thing that hasn't everyone's not screaming about yet.
Yeah.
Like drive the conversation. And to do that, it's like being a poker player. You've got to raise and raise and raise to the point where you're uncomfortable. Most members of Congress that I know care about who they are as human beings, and they wouldn't want to play that character. They wouldn't
Right.
want to do that. But it is definitely a model that works in today's media environment. Now, here's the question to you. Because of natural selection,
Hmm.
as we move forward, is that going to be the type of politician that we increasingly select for? Is that all we're going to end up with?
That is a great question. I think it's different on the congressional level, right? Like you're the who I'm voting for the House of Representatives. But I think as you get more national and it gets harder and harder, I think that we're essentially, politics has always been the line between a politician and an actor has always been a little bit, right? Was
Sure.
it FDR said to Orson Welles, there's two great actors in the world and you are the other one? It was,
Yes, that's
but I
good.
think that it is going to turn into a more extreme version of what we are seeing, where what matters is the can you say the craziest shit? Can you look good while you're saying it? And can you debase yourself and have like enough shamelessness to continue to do that? And what does that say? Is there somebody who's going to be a policy whiz who can also do that? I don't know. You know, I think that we are going to see variations of Trump. Not necessarily on the extreme or the level of basically Trump's political performance is, I think, going to be replicated. And Gavin Newsom, I think, is doing this to a certain extent. With
Yeah, I'm
his
so glad you went to Gavin Newsom. Oh,
yeah,
go on,
well,
Bill.
his tweets, right? They're
Yeah,
ridiculous. They're like,
they
and he's
are.
really mocking Trump, but he's doing it effectively. I saw one of his tweets got 9 million views. I
Yeah.
don't know any other Democrat that can get a tweet with 9 million views. AOC maybe, Mamdani may like count on one hand the amount of people who can get 9 million views on a tweet.
All right. Since we're going dark here,
Hmm.
I wanna maybe offer a glimmer of hope though, because Newsom is such an interesting case study. Because you're right, he's doing his best Trump impression, and he's great at like the short form bullshit,
Yeah.
like jabs on social media. But you know where else he's doing well? Long form podcast. And what's fascinating to me is that
Yeah.
I helped an old friend of mine build a YouTube channel for a couple of years. It's doing very well. It's Cliff Schechter. It's got like I don't know 160,000 subscribers.
Blue Amp,
I just
Blue Amp
Blue Amp.
Media, those guys. Yeah.
Yeah,
Those
yeah,
guys
yeah.
are great. Those guys are great.
So yes, the Cliff's Edge channel. That was anyway. So when we were doing that, this was 2 or 3 years ago. What was seen as optimal on YouTube was 3 to 6 minute videos,
Hmm.
well produced, like highly produced. You had to have the lighting right. Like some of my lighting here is a legacy from that time.
Yeah.
And now it's completely flipped. It's
Hmm.
completely flipped. Now you want to be thriving in shorts or in long form podcast, which is completely unedited. And if anything, like a little sloppy. And I wonder if there's a hopeful element to that, to your point about Gavin Newsom, because it is possible that natural selection in politics will drive everything toward short, viral, TikTok style, like
Hmm.
fuck you, like that kind of political performativeness. But it's also possible that there will be another ecosystem where people can thrive, which is authentic, genuine, raw, Rogan-esque. But Pete Buttigieg is really good at that.
Yeah.
Newsom's really good at that. Like people who can like talk and be kind of edgy. I don't understand why people sit there. Like people are going to sit here and watch this. And I'm not denigrating your audience, but it's like I can't sit and watch a podcast for a long time. But
Right.
apparently people do this. Like
Yeah.
people really like my podcast is in the top 10% most viewed video podcasts on Spotify. I don't understand this, but it's great. Great. So maybe that's something good for the future of media and politics.
And you're talking about you have to have a little bit more depth, right? With the long form podcasting. You can't just be kind of somebody who stands up there and says, fuck you. I think, and the other thing too that gives me hope that I think Pete has understood, or I think Pete is a very good communicator.
Right.
But Newsom is the guy who I give a lot of kudos to for fully like seeing where house, because he's been in politics since what, like early 2000s.
Yeah.
He was, he is somebody who has tracked and really, I think, have come to understand the media moment. Uh, unlike few other Democrats, AOC Mamdani, but Newsom has understood, and I think like to understand, to go on long form podcasting, to talk to Charlie Kirk, to like he is somebody who I'm really looking at for 2028 to see kind of how this to your point, where does this end, right? Is he gonna just turn into where is he gonna go on social media or on podcasting? Where does he think that is going to lie? I think that is going to be really telling about where our politics are going. Basically, the approach he has to each medium. And then, you know, as you said, most Democratic Party has an older age slant. Um, but I think you see like an unwillingness or an inability to kind of learn the politics or the how to hack social media or how to gain attention from a majority of Democrats in Washington. And, I think part of it is because all this has been so new. But one of the things is transitioning to 2028 as we close out here, like what are the things that you are going to be looking, because that is one of the things I'm going to be looking for, is who understands this media environment and how to kind of generate a spectacle and gain attention. What are things that you are looking for in a candidate or one of the things that is going to compel you to vote for somebody, certain qualities, leadership style?
I'd like to give you a sophisticated, deep answer.
Yeah.
I'm not going to. I'm not going to. I was talking before about thinking 20 years ago, 25 years ago, oh my gosh, these George W. Bush Republicans. Oof, scary. And I had no idea. I had no idea how much I would pine for the relative sanity, rationality,
Mhm.
susceptibility to argument and reason and discourse that cohort of Republicans represented. We're at a place now where Senator Eric Schmidt said in the past week that Democrats' demands, proposals to rein in ICE are, quote, insane. Insane. And what Democrats are demanding is that ICE agents take off the masks, be clearly identifiable, that they have de escalation training, and that they wear body cameras, which Kristi Noem has already agreed to.
That they will,
And
yeah.
most important, that they only act on warrants. They have to have judicial
Mhm.
warrants, not administrative warrants, but they can't enter people's homes without warrants. We fought a revolutionary war on that issue.
I was going to say.
And you're very, very close physically to the genesis of that war. And if you read the Declaration of Independence and the list of grievances against the king, quartering officers in our communities, inciting them, the language they use is inciting them to insurrection, which is very Trumpian. But in the
Yeah.
time, what it meant is the officers, the British officers, were responsible for inciting these,
Mhm.
these violent uprisings because of their cruelty, because of what they were doing to the populace. You look at that and you look at this brand of MAGA republicanism, and you look at the polling and realize that MAGA Republicans probably represent about 15, maybe 20% of Americans. Probably 15 is closer. But they have this leveraged hammerlock
Yes.
on the Republican Party and therefore on all of us. And I am not convinced that Trump leaving the political stage is going to be the end of Trumpism. I think the opposite. And you see it in the ways that J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio are trying to grab a hold of the MAGA mantle. And they're
Right.
performatively trying to inhabit that space. And the way to do it is by acting like Trump, which
Mhm.
means outrages against law, reason, and the Constitution.
Yeah.
So you asked me what I'm looking for. I'm looking for one thing. Who can beat that? Because I really think it is so trite. Trust me, I've been in this for almost 35 years now. It's so trite to say this is the most important election of our lifetime. But what else could even compare?
Yeah.
We have to decide. And for my Republican co host of my show, he's fighting with his fellow Republicans every day to wrest back control of his own party. He's saying this is a time for choosing. Are we going to commit ourselves to this direction forever? It's the same larger question for America. Is this going to be the fight that we're going to have? If we go down, if we have a Trump clone or an actual Trump, you know, like an actual Trump kid, win the White House in 2028, I don't know how we ever dig ourselves out of that. And so I see it as a battlefield triage emergency. We are
Mm.
making a life and death of the Republic decision here. And yes, I'm attracted to Gavin Newsom's ability to do a little bit of both and to mix it up and to gain the attention and to be a bit of an entertainer because clearly that's what people want.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm supporting him, but I'm saying I'm not necessarily looking for the kinds of leadership qualities that I used to, because all I care about is winning and preventing the death of the Republic at this point.
It's a sad thing, but I think for us to truly dig ourselves out, and we have to win, Democrats have to win the presidential. This is a multi-year project. We have to win two, three, four presidencies in a row, I think, to fully eradicate kind of Trumpism and what it represents and how it's infected our politics. But I do want to end two more things before we end. I do want to, what is hope? What does give you hope? Because one of the things is clearly these institutions weren't working for many people. They turned to Trump. Trump offered to break this shit. He offered to come in with a sledgehammer and I think really drain the swamp. And really, he's just made the swamp worse. I think the corruption from Trump and all of his cronies. But these institutions, maybe there is the silver lining, maybe there is a willingness among people to revamp our institutions, to change the way we do things that actually helps ordinary people, right? Because I think that has been the biggest people who don't feel like the system's working for them. What's tethering us to not creating something new that actually does work for them?
I think there are two things that give me hope. One is Minnesota. You see people,
Yeah.
example after example after example, that I've gone online and verified with research, that these things you see on social media about people standing up for friends or neighbors or strangers in their
Yeah.
community, I think that gives me hope because it is the best of the American impulse. And it's an impulse that we've seen around the world. Um, you see, if you read of Holocaust survival stories and you read about people putting their lives on the line to protect strangers,
Mm.
that's what you're seeing. That's why Alex Preddy's story resonated so much, and he's an example of what you're seeing literally thousands of people doing. And it's not because they're Democrats, it's not because they're Republicans. I bet there are Republicans among them. It's because they're good people and they're Americans. And that's the best of the impulse that we have, that led to the creation of our country and that's held us together. We're the only nation in the history of the world that is held together by a creed and a belief in a political system and nothing else.
Right.
And the other thing gives me hope. Yes, I'm buttering up my host, but it is you and people like you who are still interested. We've talked so much about awfulness in the last hour, and yet here you are. You're doing a show. You're interested in this work. You started by climbing up triple deckers, and you're still doing it. And the more you see of, some of the ugly side of it, you're undeterred. And I think that's incredibly important. We need people who are, 20, 25 years younger than I am getting into this for the right reasons. And it's because they care and they have that same spirit as the people in Minnesota. And so I have some faith that there is a self-renewing
Yeah.
proposition here. And that if people like the people in your audience who are clearly into this, and you stay on it, we can work our way through it.
Wow. I appreciate that. That was in first with Minnesota. What were they chanting? Like, it's not too late to change your mind.
Right.
At like, wow, you know, to and it is like we meet hate with love. And I think that you are so right on Minnesota. And it is that like we inspire each other. We need each other. We take inspiration from different parts of this country to kind of continue on and fight and show that, to build a better world is possible. And so that kind of just dovetails with my last question here. What advice would you give young people, that model UN high schooler who's, loves politics and they know they want to go to law school right after college and then work on their hill, and then, what advice would you give them?
Read hardball. Um,
Yeah,
it's
that's great.
super useful. I think I'd go back to this was he just passed away. My grad school mentor, David Gergen, um, you know, presidential advisor for presidents, Democrats and Republicans,
Mhm.
CNN commentator, and a professor at the Kennedy School. And he's the one who gave me that look. If you go into this, meaning if you go to Washington, but it could be you go to the state
Yeah.
house, if you go into politics, if you go into it to be somebody, it will be empty. If you go into it to do something, it will be meaningful. And I think you need to decide what it is you want to do and have it be about someone and something, not yourself, that benefits people in a very direct way, and keep that as your North Star,
Mm.
because it is going to be shitty along the way. You're going to knock on a lot of doors. You're going to answer a lot of mail in your first job on Capitol Hill. You're going to deal with a lot of fuck nuts. You're going to deal with people who are immune to reason, and you're going to have some painful losses, a lot of painful losses. And if you're able to remember kids like Michelle Morse, I'm doing it for her,
Yeah.
people in the North Country of Maine, who the mill closed down 25 years ago, and their kids are definitely leaving town. You're doing it for them.
Mm.
If you remember what you're doing it for, who you're doing it for, then it'll be meaningful.
Yeah. Well, that's great. That is a great way to end the podcast. Matt Robison, thank you so much. Can you remind us where we can find your podcast, Substack?
Sure, sure. The Substack, which is where I kind of concatenate everything together to use $100 word, is worth knowing substack.com. It's worth knowing with Matt Robison. The podcast is still called Beyond Politics. I'm a shitty brander. I should probably just put everything under one brand, but I haven't. So the podcast is Beyond Politics. And I live stream every Tuesday. I do the political rehab show, which is kind of like PTI meets the Daily Show, a Republican and a Democrat who really try to have a good time with the news and keep people informed. And we start by dumping on Trump every week, and it's, to me, it makes me feel a little bit more hopeful, because it's like, hey, we can still do this together. So you can get all of that worth knowing, or you could search for me on Newsweek. I'm there pretty regularly.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Max.